Hello, I'm Martin, the host of Short Stories. Today's story is derived from the opera Falstaff, which premiered February 9th, 1893 in Milan, Italy. The composer for this opera was Giuseppe Verdi, who was quite famous in his day. Verdi based this comedic opera off of the works of Shakespeare. In fact, the title character, Sir John Falstaff, appears in 3 Shakespeare plays. You could say that this opera is a remake of The Merry Wives of Windsor. Even in the 1890s, they wanted to squeeze more value out of old IP. Vocabulary: codger, codger. The codger yelled at the children to get off his lawn. Corpulent, corpulent. The corpulent man ordered another pizza. Frighten or scare the bejesus out of someone. Frighten the bejesus out of someone. You scared the bejesus out of me. Don't do that again. Ghoul, ghoul. Don't go into that house. It's full of ghouls. Humiliate, humiliate. My parents humiliated me at the parent-teacher conference. Rube, rube. The salesman made a lot of money off of the rubes who came to town. Underhanded, underhanded. He became party leader through underhanded means. Woo, woo. Sam wooed Ellen for months before she agreed to marry him. In the merry town of Windsor, there was a tavern called the Garter Inn. Staying in this inn was a corpulent knight named Sir John Falstaff and his 2 squires. They were enjoying a meal one night when they were interrupted by Dr. Caius. "Where's my money?" demanded the good doctor. Falstaff gently put down his cup of ale and replied, "What are you talking about, Caius?" Waving a finger at Falstaff's fat face, he said, "You know bloody well what I'm talking about. You stayed at my house last night, and this morning I discovered some of my silver was missing. You are a burglar." Falstaff laughed loudly and replied, "I am a knight, sir. Why would I have a need to burgle anybody? You probably just misplaced your silver, you old codger." Dr. Caius turned red, huffed, and stormed out. Falstaff's squires, Bardolpho and Pistola, laughed nervously. They knew their master well enough to know that he actually might commit a crime. The 3 drinking buddies were interrupted once again when the waiter arrived with the bill. Falstaff took one look at it and turned silent. Then, looking at his companions, he said, "I need money." Bardolpho blinked and responded, "But didn't you just say that you didn't need money?" Falstaff laughed and replied, "No, I said I didn't need to burgle it, but that doesn't preclude me from acquiring money from willing donors." Bardolpho and Pistola looked at one another before saying, "We don't have any money either." Falstaff burst into a deep, hearty laughter. "Ha, ha, ha! Oh, have no fear. I do not plan to get money from you 2. I pay your salaries, so I know how little you both have." The squires sighed in relief. "Then how do you plan to get some money?" asked Pistola. Falstaff leaned forward, smirked, and whispered, "From the Merry Wives of Windsor, of course." Falstaff explained his plan to the squires. He would write 2 love letters, one to Alice Ford, one to Meg Page. At least one of them would respond positively, he assumed. And once a relationship was established, Falstaff planned to worm his way into the lady's fortune. "The Merry Wives of Windsor are married to the 2 richest men in town, not including the king, of course," Falstaff explained. "With my charms, they'll be throwing money at me in no time." Bardolpho and Pistola looked at each other again. Then Falstaff reached into his bag and pulled out 2 letters that he had already written and handed them to his squires. They took one look at the letters and said, "We can't do this. This is unethical, even for you." Falstaff grew angry and bellowed, "You are my servants. Now go serve, or I will find 2 new servants who will." The squires were a bit taken aback by this sudden change in mood and didn't move. Growing even angrier, Falstaff picked up a nearby broom and, brandishing it like a sword, threatened his vassals with corporal punishment if they did not do as he asked. Bardolpho and Pistola took the letters and ran out the door. In the garden of the Ford mansion sat Meg, Alice, and her daughter Nanette. They were comparing the letters that they had received from Sir John Falstaff, and giggling like schoolgirls. "I can't believe he thought this would work," jeered Alice. "He must think we are fools," suggested Meg. Alice had a sudden brainstorm and snapped her fingers. "Let's play along," she suggested. Meg was puzzled and asked what she meant. Alice explained her plan. She would reply positively to Falstaff's letter and invite him over. Once inside, they could play a trick to humiliate him. "Let's teach this creep a lesson," grinned Alice. Meg agreed. "What do you think, dear?" Alice asked Nanette. The young girl shrugged and said, "I guess it could be fun." Nanette Ford was the only child of Alice and Lord Ford. It was Lord Ford's wish that she marry well, so he arranged for her to wed Dr. Caius. Alice knew that this match wasn't to her daughter's liking. "Cheer up, dear," said Alice. "We'll think of something to help you out of your predicament as well." Meanwhile, inside the house were Lord Ford, Bardolpho, and Pistola. The squires were warning him of the machinations of the underhanded Falstaff. Lord Ford's face turned red with rage. "How dare he!" he exclaimed. Pistola cautioned him against hasty action, because Falstaff was a nobleman as well. "Well, if he wants to sneak around and play tricks," replied Lord Ford, "2 can play at that game." Lord Ford then explained his plan to the squires. He would disguise himself as a stranger and entice Falstaff into a trap. There were now 2 plots against Falstaff, but neither plotting party knew what the other was doing. The next day, Falstaff received a letter from Alice Ford, suggesting a rendezvous from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. The plump knight pumped his fist in triumph. "I knew my plan would work," he gleefully exclaimed. Not a minute later, he heard a knock at his door. He opened the door and discovered Bardolpho and Pistola. "There's someone asking for you, sir," said Bardolpho. Falstaff was delighted and curious. "She asked me to meet her at her house tomorrow. What is she doing here?" he muttered. "It's a man, sir," explained Pistola. "He's waiting for you downstairs in the tavern." Falstaff put on his cloak and headed downstairs to meet this mysterious visitor. "Hello!" greeted the visitor in a painfully bad Italian accent that Falstaff failed to notice. "I am Signore Fontana. I have a proposition for you." Falstaff was puzzled and intrigued. He could tell from the stranger's clothes that he was very wealthy, and wealthy strangers are usually rubes. "What do you propose?" he asked. Signore Fontana, who was actually Lord Ford in disguise, explained his plan. He wanted to woo the beautiful Alice Ford, but because he was a foreigner, he was afraid to approach her directly. He wanted Falstaff to do the wooing for him. "I will, of course, compensate you for your efforts," offered Signore Fontana. Falstaff pumped his fist again and replied, "That's perfect. I actually have a meeting scheduled with her tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Fontana's heart skipped a beat. "Really?" he muttered. "Yes," exclaimed Falstaff. "Don't worry. I'll turn her into a putty in my hand in no time." After this meeting, Falstaff returned to his room to prepare his fanciest outfit. He began singing a triumphant song. Meanwhile, Lord Ford, still in disguise, lingered in the tavern, singing about the uncertainty of marriage and his desire for revenge. The next day, Alice and Meg were in the Ford mansion, singing merrily about the prank they were about to pull. They had carefully set up a large laundry basket near the garbage chute in an upstairs bedroom overlooking the River Thames. Alice planned to trick Falstaff into hiding in this basket, and then quickly have her male servants flip it over, dumping the fat knight down the chute. "Oh, what fun we will have!" they sang. "The merry wives of Windsor, our time has come." Suddenly the maid entered the room and to announce the arrival of Sir Falstaff. Alice took her place while Meg and Nanette hid behind changing screens. "Come in," sang Alice. Falstaff swaggered into the room, bowed, and kissed Alice's hand. "My lady," he began, "I am so happy you agreed to see me." Alice played along for several minutes in order to lure him deeper into a false sense of security. "Please excuse the mess," she said. "It's laundry day." Falstaff smiled and said, "I should consider myself lucky. It's not every day that a gentleman gets to see a lady's underpants." This scene was interrupted when the maid burst in and warned, "Lord Ford is here." Alice froze for a second and thought, "She's too early. She's not supposed to say that yet." But what Alice did not know was that Lord Ford really was downstairs, itching to give Falstaff a beating. "Quickly," said Alice, snapping into action, "hide in this laundry basket." Falstaff squeezed his fat butt as far as he could into the laundry basket, while Alice dumped heaps of dirty underwear and socks on top of him. "Oi, it stinks," complained Falstaff. "Shh, he'll hear you," scolded Alice. To Alice's surprise, Lord Ford burst into the room and shouted, "Where is the dirty rat?" Alice's eyes widened and she said, "Whatever do you mean, darling?" Lord Ford growled and replied, "I'm talking about that fat Falstaff. I know he's here." He stomped over to the nearest screen and knocked it over. "Eep!" yelled Meg. "I'm changing." Lord Ford's face turned red and he apologized. "Maybe he's behind this one," he said as he knocked over the second screen. This time, Lord Ford's face turned twice as red because behind this screen were Nanette and her boyfriend, Fenton. "What are you doing here?" demanded Lord Ford. Nanette hid her face in embarrassment, while Fenton simply smiled nervously. Alice broke the tension by declaring, "There is no Falstaff here. Now please leave." Lord Ford, now fully red from crushing embarrassment, stormed out of the room. Once he was gone, Alice signaled her male servants to come in and flip the basket, which they did with surprising speed, considering how heavy the contents were. Meg, Alice, and Nanette ran to the window to get a good look at the humiliation of the foolish Falstaff, who was now floating down the Thames with the other turds. The pudgy man bobbed and blubbered as he slowly drifted past the town market, where everyone pointed and laughed at him. That evening Falstaff staggered back to the Garter Inn and bought himself a mulled wine in order to warm up his body and lift his spirits. "What a miserable day," he grumbled as he flicked a piece of filth out of his hair. His grumbling was interrupted when one of Alice's maids arrived to deliver a new message. "The lady apologizes for what happened this afternoon and wishes to meet with you at midnight near Hearn's Oak," announced the maid. Falstaff shook his head and refused the invitation, but the maid was persistent. "She'll pay for your dry cleaning, sir," she offered. Falstaff muttered and said, "All right." Then the maid handed him a sheet and said, "And wear this, so no one will recognize you." Falstaff made a puzzled expression, but accepted the invitation anyway. Hearn's Oak was a very large and old tree in the middle of Windsor Park. It was famous for being haunted. Many locals believed that ghosts and ghouls came out at midnight to dance around the tree. For this reason, Alice and her husband had decided to play their final trick on Falstaff here. After the events of that afternoon, Alice spoke to her husband and explained everything. He was relieved to find that his wife was not planning on cheating. Together, they came up with an elaborate plan to lure Falstaff to Hearn's Oak, where they would frighten the bejesus out of him. However, unbeknownst to Alice, Lord Ford concocted a side plot to marry Nanette with Dr. Caius at the same time. "I can't let my daughter marry below her station," he thought to himself. I need to nip this problem in the bud." So Lord Ford conspired with Dr. Caius and a local priest to perform a surprise wedding. Falstaff arrived on time, wearing the sheet that the maid had given him. "Where are you, my lady?" moaned Falstaff as he stumbled through the darkness. "I'm over here," called Alice, who was also disguised as a spirit. "Why are we disguised as ghosts?" asked Falstaff. "So no one will dare to come near us, my darling," answered Alice. "But what if the real ghosts arrive?" inquired Falstaff. "Don't be silly," replied Alice. "There's no such thing as ghosts." Without warning, a troop of ghoulish figures leaped out of the shadows all around them. Falstaff screamed in terror and tried to run away, but he quickly tripped on the sheet he was wearing and fell flat on his face. The ghouls converged on him and began beating him with sticks. Falstaff tried to grab one of the sticks so as to defend himself, but wound up pulling the sheet off of one of the ghouls. "Pistola?" he exclaimed. "You got me," replied the bemused squire. The beating stopped, and some of the ghouls removed their masks to reveal their identities. They were all servants and friends of Lord and Lady Ford. "I hope you've learned your lesson," said Alice, with her arms akimbo. "Oh, I have," declared the bruised Falstaff. To Alice's surprise, Lord Ford announced that there would be a wedding. "Will the happy couple please step forward?" he shouted. A hooded monk stepped forward, dragging a fairy queen behind him. "What's going on, darling?" asked Alice. "Trust me," replied Lord Ford with a wink. The priest performed the ceremony in front of everyone. "You may now kiss the bride," declared Lord Ford. The monk removed his hood to reveal that he was Dr. Caius, who then lifted the mask off of the fairy queen. To his and everyone else's amazement, the fairy queen turned out to be Bardolpho. "What is the meaning of this?" sputtered Lord Ford. Falstaff let loose a hearty laugh. "It looks like I'm not the only fool tonight," he said. Meg stepped forward, with two masked figures standing behind her. "This is my doing," she explained. "I overheard Lord Ford's plan and conspired to spoil it." The masked figures standing behind her removed their masks to reveal that they were Nanette and Fenton. "Please let us marry, father," begged Nanette. Lord Ford's face turned red again, but his anger and embarrassment were assuaged by his wife. "Fenton may not be a nobleman," she said, "but he has a good heart. He'll take good care of her, just like you take good care of me." Lord Ford's heart melted, and he consented to the marriage, which the priest performed on the spot. The crowd cheered to celebrate the happy couple. Even Falstaff was in a good mood. "All the world is a joke," he declared, "but he who laughs last laughs best." Questions. Number 1. What is Falstaff's plan to get more money? A. Burgle Dr. Caius. B. Rob Lord Ford. C. Borrow money from his squires. D. Weasel money out of Alice or Meg. The answer is, of course, D. To weasel money out of Alice or Meg. Question 2. Why does Lord Ford disguise himself as a stranger? A. To fool Falstaff. B. To get past the guard. C. To hide from the police. D. To enjoy a party. The answer is A. To fool Falstaff. Question 3. Why did Alice and Lord Ford lure Falstaff to Herne's Oak? A. To invite him to a party. B. To play one more trick on him. C. To marry him. D. To catch some ghosts. The answer is B. To play one more trick on him. Question 4. Who got married in the end? A. Alice and Lord Ford. B. Alice and Meg. C. Nanette and Fenton. D. Falstaff and Alice. The answer is C, Nanette and Fenton.